Thank you for gracing us with your presence. Better late than never, I guess.
So Wanderer the Fragments of Fate had a Steam release last Thursday, and with it came what the devs are calling patch 1.5, and this was rolled out to PlayStation VR2 and Quest. I'll put a link to the notes for this patch in the description, but I've had a look through, and it's mainly notes about improving overall stability and combat improvements, and then a lot of specific fixes that they've made. Now this isn't going to be a video moaning about the game, but it's no secret that this game released in a poor state. My first impressions were awful, and I quickly shelved it in the hope that it would get fixed. So 6 months later, with this relatively big patch dropping, I decided to leap in and take a look. I didn't think for a moment I'd want to make a video about it, and I said to myself that I'll play it until I encounter a game-breaking bug or something that's just ruining my experience. Well, 3.5 hours later, I only stopped playing because my controllers died. So I reinstalled the game and started a brand new save. The main menu area is immediately impressive, it looks great. It did take 1/10 of a second for some of the textures to render fully, and this leads me straight into one of the few negatives that stood out to me, that I was seeing quite a bit of texture popping, particularly in the Boston level. The Boston level was the only time I found it distracting though, so it clearly does need some work there. It wasn't too bad at all really in any of the other levels. And to be clear, in this 3.5 hours I visited the lab in the introduction, Boston, the apartment, the moon and the Mayan temple. Next, let's get the combat out of the way, because if you're like me and you jumped into this game back in April, you may remember some of the combat being atrocious, particularly when you were stealth throwing knives at human enemies. So after this latest patch, it's definitely going in the right direction. The gun and melee combat on the Boston level is now just okay instead of bad. The ragdoll physics feels off. The human enemies seem to react quite dramatically to your weapons. It doesn't look natural yet. But then as soon as I entered the Mayan temple level, I was fighting robot drones and this was fine. Nothing too exciting, but it felt competent at least, and the enemies were fighting back. And to be fair, the devs do acknowledge in the patch notes that there's still some work to be done on the combat, so let's hope that there's quite a lot of improvements in the future. Okay, onto the good stuff. The intro section in the lab is pretty awesome and pretty polished. You get a nice introduction to the game engine and VR AF mechanics, and it's genuinely fun, like experimenting and playing around with different items to see what they can do. And this brings me on to the apartment, which acts as your hub for the game. And I thought this was stunning, and I spent at least an hour in here just playing around with items and going through all the cupboards and seeing what was there. And whilst I was there, I also did something really weird. I put on some music and I started tidying up.
Great Scott!
I wanted to put things away and organise them, like arranging all my tools by the workbench and finding a good place to keep my weapons. And the game allows you to do this as well, because it remembers where you leave everything. You can even teleport to the different areas and bring stuff back and just display it in your apartment. It just gives me that feeling that by the end of this journey I'm going to have a home that's full of trinkets that's kind of unique to me.
You're gonna have to forgive me. I'm normally the picture of lucidity.
You'll also meet Samuel in your apartment, and he's your little wristwatch companion. Really well voiced by the way, and has a real presence, as you can take him off your wrist and just let him fly around. This is one way you can get hints as well as to where to go next. Samuel also introduces you to his UI, which looks really sharp and clean and easy to use.
Who you are.
Then there's a few puzzles you need to do in the apartment before you really start your adventure. These all worked really well. They were good puzzles without being frustrating. And then once you've done all this, you then take your first time travel trip and go to the moon. And it was absolutely stunning. And I fully lived up to the name of the game, and I just wandered around just taking it all in. And whilst I was there, again, everything looked good. I did have to do a few things to progress, and then before I knew it, I was in the Mayan temple level. And this was a cool section because you had to move things along here by swapping between two different characters to solve the puzzles. Anyway, I said I'm not going to spoil too many things. What I'll say is, again, it ran fine and I didn't encounter any game-breaking bugs. And so around this point my controllers needed to charge and I stopped playing. And I know I only played some of the early game, but I came away from it feeling encouraged and that they're not far off now from this being the game that they wanted it to be. It just needs that extra polish with some of the visuals and performance, and there's still improvements that need to be made with some of the combat, but there's so much to like about this game already. Most of the environments and visuals look stunning. The VRAF mechanics and haptics are really good. The immersion is incredible. The puzzles are fun, the voice acting and soundtrack are great. It feels like they're almost there. So I say this to people who own the game and are maybe curious about how it is now. It feels pretty safe to dive in. It's playable, which it just wasn't at release. And I've just really enjoyed my time with it. Sure, you're unlikely to be seeing it at its best yet, and that should come when patch 2.0 is eventually fully released. And that's why I say be wary if you haven't bought the game yet, because there's still work being actively done on it right now. You know, like other games, such as No Man's Sky. And we know how that turned out. Eventually. And that's that. If you're interested in more VR content, then feel free to subscribe. If this video is useful to you, then please drop a like. Thanks for watching.
Buckle up, kid. It looks like we're in for a real shitstorm.